Hello, everyone, and welcome to Padawan Unlimited. I am Gil, and thank you so much for joining me today on this exciting episode I have planned for you, which is an updated Obi-Wan deck tech list that I had been developing over the last couple of weeks. If you've been paying attention to the channel and you watched before, I had an Obi-Wan deck list like from months ago, but the meta wasn't ready or wasn't conducive to having a successful Obi-Wan deck because of the dominance of card control at the time, but because of the kind of shift, because, Han 1, for example, is kind of scaring away a lot of the hard control decks, and we see a lot more Tarkin Towns decks, Quinlins, Jangos, and Cad Banes. Obi-Wan is primed to do relatively well. And I say that because even with some evidence that Obi-Wan did top four in the Duluth PQ. I've taken this to two PQs. I went 3-4 in one of them, and I went 4-2 in another. Topped 16 at the most recent one, and it was a relatively competitive field in both of these events. So, again, I'm not like the best player out there, but if you want to play a deck off meta and have a positive record and potentially do well, I think this is a deck that's going to be primed for you. Now, my style is a little bit more aggressive, and you'll see as I kind of talk about it why that is. Today, I'm going to talk about the 50 cards here and the 10 card sideboard. I'm going to talk about some lines that you should potentially consider against the significant meta decks that are out there. Go into deep dives for three of the cards I have, which is Clone, Choose Sides, Obi-Wan Ether Sprite, and finally some other card considerations. So if you don't really necessarily like my play style and it doesn't work for you, there's other cards that I think may fit your play style better. So with that out of the way, one last thing before I continue. If you're new to the channel and you haven't liked or subscribed to the video, please consider doing so. It really helps me out. I really like to provide content for each of the community, and any feedback that you have would be very helpful. Okay, so at the one drop, I have timely interventions. I have two of them, not three. I think two is just perfectly fine. These are very helpful, especially since I play very aggressively. I will have these, and I play them usually within the first couple of rounds anyway, in order to get board presence. Sometimes I might save it if I know it's going to be a grindy matchup, and it comes out very helpful, especially if you combo it with a big card like Luke Skywalker at 8 resources. At my two drop, I have four of them, four different cards: Regional Governor, Battlefield Marine, Gamorrean Retainer, and Scanning Officers. The Battlefield Marine and Gamorrean Retainer are pretty self-explanatory, so I'm going to go and talk about Regional Governor and Scanning Officer specifically. Regional Governor I use as a soft sentinel, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the next slide, but essentially what this means is that because it has a when played ability, when you play it, you get to name any card in the game, and your opponent can't play that card. And so if you're playing against like Sabine, for example, and you say Wrecker, and they're probably going to play Wrecker at their ECL turn, then they're going to have to deal with it, which means that they have to waste resources and actions in order to defeat Regional Governor, which allows you to do something else, right? And potentially take back the board state. And that's what I mean by soft sentinel. Also, she's really helpful in terms of, or this unit's really helpful in terms of just like blocking other cards like Waylays, Cunnings, etc. Scanning Officer, I main deck three of these because there's just a lot of Han players in my area, and also people who play like Quinlan Tarkentown, or that has like the Hot Shot Blasters, Cassian Andors in the resource row. So this is very helpful for me. But what this does is that you get to reveal enemy resources, and if anything has smuggle, you can destroy it, put it in the discard, and have to draw new cards, which is very helpful to have at that point because you're kind of really messing up a lot of their long-term planning. So, and if they have tech in play, for example, then Scanning Officer, whatever card you pick, all three are going to have to go into discard because they all technically get the smuggle trait or the smuggle keyword. So that's always helpful. At the 3 cost drop, I have Yoda, Jedi Lightsaber, Echo Base Defender, Conquer Dawn, and Resupply. Some of these are pretty self-explanatory. The one I've kind of really came around to is actually Resupply. Resupply is because a lot of my matches go longer, and then especially if you're playing against Han, or any kind of like other ramp deck, you want to be able to keep up because if you don't, you will get outclassed very, very quickly. So resupply is very helpful here. Jedi lightsaber is what I chose as a 3-drop upgrade. This is very helpful to clear the board, and also, if you can play it against on Obi-Wan, he becomes a 7/10, which is massively powerful to have on the board. And it also synergizes well with Yoda. And then on the 4 resource turn, you have Kanan Jarrus. So going on to 4 resources, I have Kanan Jarrus, Takedown, Bright Hope, Fell the Dragon. These cards are really useful to have, I think. So Fell the Dragon and Takedown are pretty self-explanatory, but Bright Hope is really helpful against the control matchups because you get to get your card draw. Advantage with the when played. I'm also really good against any deck that plays a lot of space. So that's like your Jangos, for example, really helpful. And then Obi-Wan's Ether Sprite is essentially another space removal because of his ability, because of the ability to, when played on attack, you do 1 damage to the unit itself, and then you get to do 2 damage back to the other side. So, once you throw Obi-Wan in space, especially if you ECL him in, you can take out 3 ships in one go. Or you can even take out an Avenger at the 9 resource turn with simply an Obi-Wan's Ether Sprite and Timely Intervention, which still allows you to play another 3-drop card. Very helpful. Aayla Secura rounds out the 5 resource turn. Sometimes I just use her to ECL in and take out a big unit like a Poe against Sabine. Other times, I try to save it for the her on attack to prevent all damage. Again, really depends on the situation, but I like Aayla Secura. 6/5 is pretty good. I mean, she's still within takedown range. And she can be target down if you defeat a two cost unit that does 2 damage back to you. But I think she's still fine. Plus, she has Republic tagged Force Jedi, which again synergizes with other things in the deck. General Riken is the only 6-drop I have. I actually have 2 of him. He's very helpful to have. Ideally, you want to combo him with Obi-Wan at that Obi-Wan turn, but most players won't allow you to do that. I actually use Obi-Wan. I actually use General Riken. If it's not for the Sentinel, it's either to buff other Sentinels. So, for example, you can make a Gamma guard for a Gamorrean Retainer a 4/3. Very helpful. You can make Echo Base Defender 5/4 when you play him. You can also just make a non-Sentinel a Sentinel. So, for example, let's say you have an Obi-Wan Ether Sprite from the previous turn, and then you're at 6 resources, and you have General Riken out, and you're going to play General Riken. Play General Riken, you can make Obi-Wan Ether Sprite a Sentinel, which blocks off that lane of attack from an opponent playing space cards, space units, because they have a 4/6 body they have to deal with. General Riken has a lot of flex play. Don't always think about the combination with him and Obi. Think about how other things work with him. At the 7 resources, I have Luke Skywalker, U-Wing Reinforcement. Pretty self-explanatory. Really good cards to have. Really want to go wide anyway with U-Wing. So Luke Skywalker's removal, restore, perfect card to have in this deck. The last thing I have, and this was also one change I had from the last time I presented this deck. I actually have 1 redemption and 2 home ones. This is the capital ships section is relatively flexible depending on your meta. I'm okay with this right now. Sometimes you might want to play either 2 redemptions, 1 home one, or even tranquilities instead. But home one is fantastic because you give everyone restore, helps you stabilize, big capital ship, and also you get to play another unit from your discard pile. Lots of times I end up choosing Yoda. Because you get additional restore, and then also card draw if it gets defeated. So home one is a great card to have, especially against control decks. And then redemption to stabilize if you need, to heal up at any given point. In the sideboard, these cards are meant to deal with specific matchups that you might find challenging. So top target is for any aggro deck, so that you're not going to really go to 7 or 8 resources. For example, your Jangos or your Tarkin, your Jangos or your Sabine specifically. Top target's very helpful to get those heals off. Confiscate is there against any of the Bosk decks, against Anakin Blue that plays lightsabers. Anything like that plays bounties or significant upgrade cards. Gar, for example, if you end up playing those, that's always very helpful to have, or even like a Traitorous, like against Palpatine decks. That's always helpful. Tech is there for the long games, any games that you're playing against that are very grindy or hard control. Tech is going to be very helpful. It's going to be your best friend here. I only have 1 vigilance, and I specifically chose to do that. 6 cost is really expensive for me, and it's really hard to find like where you want to fit it. But I actually save vigilances. I don't even really play vigilances against other aggro decks. I actually play it against control. And the reason is because I will save this until the very end of the game for when someone is trying to do the restock loop on me. I will vigilance to heal and discard that to stop that loop. That's one of the main things I try to do with it, and then puts me ahead because I would heal damage, and that's fantastic. And most people are going to be surprised by that, especially if they don't see vigilance played in any of the other games. Rivals Fall is there for any decks that have significant upgrades or any big, you just need a big removal out there. I mean, one time I played against a Chirrut deck that just had a bunch of upgrades on it and legal authority, all types of nonsense that I just couldn't deal with. And Rivals Fall would have been very helpful in that matchup. Also, if you are playing against Anakin Blue and you can't find your confiscates, for example, you need to defeat that big unit, defeat him. Anything like that, that's what Rivals Fall is for. And then True Size and Clone is actually in the sideboard. I actually bring those in a lot against a lot of other decks like CAD, Bane unit decks are something that I love having clone for. Choose sides for anything that goes big, that and grindy, that has reinforced walkers or Avengers, or even like um, uh, Devastators. Those are cards I want to have, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about them in the next couple slides. Okay, so now that you've seen those cards, I want to talk about some lines and considerations. I'm not going to go through every single deck out there. These are three decks or three leaders that I've seen a lot of significant play out there in the wilderness that have won a lot of different things. So I'm going to focus on these for now. The one I really want to talk about first is Sabine, mostly ECL. When I played against other color combinations Sabine, so for example, Sabine yellow, I pretty much win every time. ECL is the hardest one. Of course, it is definitely a dominant deck. I will force an ECL early if I see that it's going to be a positive trade. So for example, if someone plays um, a a Sabine unit with the 2/3 and I have the Battlefield Marine, I'm going to take that trade every time. I'm going to start building my board. If they play like an R2D2 or something for whatever reason, or a small unit, I'm still going to do it as well, because I want to be able to establish a dominant board space, specifically going it for the Sabine flip turn, because I will have much more options before they get to theirs, so that I can force like them to deploy early, right? Um, I only ramp if I have a positive board state. So let's say if you actually pull off getting that positive board state within the first couple of rounds, play that. You can play the you can play a resupply, and then you'll be able to get your Ayla out early. You can do Kanan plus um timely intervention, right, to get some heals and also to potentially defeat another unit on the other side. That's great. These are the types of things that I try to do with Sabine, and usually catches people off guard. Regional governance, as I mentioned before, as a soft sentinel, I have named Wrecker, Poe, Darksaber, and if they want to play those cards, they have to defeat my regional governor. And because regional governor has 4 health, right, if they don't have like their K2SO to play, that means they're forced to use 2 units to defeat mine, or upgrade an upgraded like unit to defeat the regional governor, which means that that's time that I'm saving on my base in order to be able to establish a better board state. Um, and then when the sideboard plan here is you just bring in top targets, and you're going to be in a better position than you were game one. If you take game one, you're pretty much going to take game two. You're going to win that set because that's even before you get your top targets in there. Django Fett, specifically Tarkin Town, is another challenging matchup, and I see that often in the meta. Don't resource your space units. I found myself for whatever reason doing that sometimes, and it always hurts. So always try not to resource them. Keep your Conquerdons, keep your Bright Hopes. Heal often. Remember that they have a Tarkin Town, and you have the ability to heal off damage. So if you find the opportunity to do that, do it so that you don't lose your board state. I made a critical mistake in my last PQ, which cost me an entire match because I just let my kin die from a Tarkin Town instead of healing. And then regional governor, I say here, one of the things I'm talking about regional governor a lot is because you have regional governor requires you to know like a lot of different cards, just like names, right? And like what cards do. And I'm just giving this advice here because since I main deck 3, and if you decide to do so, some friendly advice on what I think are better choices on what to name. So here I said ships, not events. And I say this because you can say, for example, Triple Dark Raid. against Jango Fett Tarkin Town, they might play sneak attack. Defeats the purpose, right? But if you say Ruthless Raider, or if you say, Boba Fett's like Fett's Fire Spray or something like that, that means that when they play like that triple dark raid, they can't play those big cards. They have to choose something else, which is ideally they're going to choose like they're going to whiff and choose like Seventh Fleet Defender, which is a really really weak card in comparison to Ruthless Raider, or even like for example, if you say Ruthless Raider and they throw in like Fett, they have to choose Fett's Fire Spray. You're actually saving damage and you're actually going to be ahead relatively speaking because Fett's Fire Spray only does 5 damage to your base versus Ruthless Raider, which would do 6 total because of the 2 damage to your base plus the 4, and then 2 damage to another unit on another like side, which means like they defeat it, or they turn it off, and now you can't even put damage on the other side. You can't put damage on their base. So that's why I mean, be specific. It's a little nuanced here. I think it's better to name ships and not events. Han Solo, these are like relative, not necessarily the easiest matchups, but they're winnable. Trust me, I've done it. Going wide is your safest bet. Resupply early to keep up when you can, because a lot of times they could just waylay your units anyway, so it's really not worth putting it down. And then use regional governor, name it to say bounces or cunning, in my opinion. And then situationally speaking, if later on in the game, if you're like the 7 resource turn, you can make sure that they don't play Han Solo or Enfys or even Millennium Falcon, right? Like think about those like things that could really swing the game in their favor. Name those cards and you'll do well. So I have a little picture here of scanning officers in my main deck specifically for Han, and all their colors, but also it's useful against like Tarkin, like not Tarkin, Quinlan, right? Or even Sabine, to get rid of the Cassian Andors, to get rid of, and the resource road, to get rid of hotshot blasters, anything like that. Um, Remember that this is why that card is there, and I think that's it for at least this. Again, I could talk about all the other lines out there, or the other decks, but at the end of the day, these are probably 3 that you're gonna see. Some things that I guess I'll mention now, if you haven't considered it before, if you're playing against, for example, Bosk decks, Bosk Green, that have a lot of bounties or something like that, then remember you can play around that with not even just using Confiscate, but if you can use a Bright Hope to bounce those cards, right? To bounce that unit that has been loaded up with a bunch of bounties, and then you'll be fine. Because then they just wasted all these turns doing something, and you took that opportunity from them. Against generally speaking, against other kind of like soft control decks or other ramp decks, you want to be able to ramp as much as possible with them in alignment with them, because you don't want you'll get lost, you'll get left behind. And if you just think of, and against control, remember you just want to make sure that you have multiple units on the board, and if you have to get to the end, save like vigilances and techs when they're safe, so that you can play those cards and then really, utilize the resources you have available to you. The next thing I want to talk about here is just other lines of considerations for 3 cards, because they're not really always commonly played, but I absolutely love them. The first here is Clone. Clone, just to reiterate, is 7 cost. You may have this unit enter play as a copy of a non-leader, non-vehicle unit in play, except it gains Clone and it's not unique. I use Clone as a counterplay to whatever my opponent is playing, generally speaking. Or if I'm already in a super, super positive board state, right? For example, I will then use it, and I'm not afraid of like a super laser blast. I will use it to like clone a Luke. I've used Clone to counter, for example, Cad Bane. Cad Bane captures all my units. Let's say I have like, my units are kind of damaged. They've done like damage to my Luke, and they have damage to something else, and they just take all these big units from me. I will play Clone to clone Cad Bane on the opposite side, take that Cad Bane, and now I have all these healed units on my side of the board. It is a great thing to do. It is, and people generally don't expect it. Sometimes, if you don't have anything and they have they played like a Poe or Emperor Palpatine, and Emperor Palpatine comes in and plays and defeats all your units, you can play Clone for 7 cost, defeat their Palpatine, and then you have your own Palpatine on your side of the board, right? So these are things, again, considering, or you can clone their Snoke, right? To equalize the board state. These are just things that you should always consider when playing clone. I use it as counterplay. I think it's great. Choose sides is another card I think is really fantastic, especially when you get into these grindy matchups that go to like Devastator level or Reinforcement Walker, and you can't really deal with them. Um, because those units cost so much, you can play a two cost, and then you could play choose sides, and you could take it from them. And that's why I like this card. It is a get out of jail free kind of thing. You get to choose a friendly non-leader unit and an enemy non-leader unit, exchange control of those units. So another combo, for example, is let's say you have a two. Let's say someone plays an Avenger, defeats your side of the board. You can on that same exact turn, you can still play a two cost unit and choose sides and swap it, and then you take the Avenger from them. Right. So these are just really good things to do, and I think you'll have a good time playing with this card because you'll have an answer to something beyond you. And then finally, Obi-Wan's Ether Sprite. I like this card. The reason I'm talking about this is because a lot of people still when I even play in like tournaments, like don't exactly remember what this does. And I so if they don't remember, you might not remember. And what this card is it's a fantastic space unit. It's 4/6, means can't be felled and it can't be just takedown right away. But really, what happens is that when it has two things: a when played and on attack. Deal one damage to a unit when you play it, and you could deal one damage to this unit, and then you could take out a two health space unit on the other side. If you're ECLing this in, you get to do both things, which means that you can ambush a bigger space unit, and then deal two damage to this, do one damage to this unit, to the Obi-Wan Kenobi sprite, two damage to another space unit, then do it again. You do that three times. You get to attack, and then you get to do three different things. I mean, you get to attack and defeat a card, defeat a space unit, and then you get to do this twice, and you're solid. Or you can trade up into like an Avenger, for example, and do 8 damage off 6 resources if you have like a timely intervention Obi-Wan's Ether Sprite, which still allows you to play a 3-drop unit on the same turn. Fantastic thing that I think Obi-Wan's Ether Sprite is like one card that I will save towards the end of the game, especially if I know it's like a green blue villainy deck. Okay, finally, some card options I want to provide here. I've seen this around. I've seen a lot of these cards kind of played around in different venues. I've tested them as well. I'm going to talk about ground, space, and then I'll talk about some upgrades. So in the ground arena, Hu Yang is really great if you want to have like this kind of combo-y like Gamorrean Retainer that becomes super powerful round two. If you want to cheat out units with General's Blade on a Hu Yang early, that's something great to do as well. Kiadi Mundi is a card that I think is really actually better for this deck if you're not playing the 30 cost, if you're not playing an ECL, but also if you're against control, because you get the card draw with the coordinate. So because you're going low to the ground anyway with this deck, generally speaking, Caddy Moody's coordinate ability means that you get to draw cards every time an opponent plays multiple cards, right? And so that gives you this kind advantage, which allows you to play a lot of different things. And I think that's very fantastic and can be very critical in these long, grindy games. Village Protectors, it's a staple from last season. I think a lot of people found answers to it, and it's not really helpful with a lot of these ping decks because it only it just ends up being a 2/2, which is easily you can't really trade. But it's really good to have just like an extra Sentinel at 3 cost. I just didn't find the space for it. Tranquility as a space unit is really good, especially if you're against control decks or if you're trying to get that loop. So what Tranquility does is when you play it, you get to get this Republic card back from your discard pile, so you can start looping, I guess, especially against control, which allows you to just always have cards to play, which is really great. Not necessarily my play style, but again, I talked about the options at the capital ship section of the deck. So if you feel like you need to have that, you want to have that loop, do it. Shout out to this guy named Reader at the KTO Discord. He's been testing out this mercenary gunship, and I think it's actually a good call to have because you get a 2 cost, 3 damage or 3 attack unit on the first turn. Very helpful to have, especially if you're trying to trade in space, because I don't run 2-drop space units. I go straight to Concord Dawn. But this is really helpful. And also, if you are playing against this Avenger combination where they defeat they defeat your last unit. Let's say you have a mercenary gunship and a choose sides, for example. You can mercenary gunship. You can then trade the for the Avenger, and then you could buy back the gunship the next round. if you so desire. You know what I mean? So you have a lot of options, and if you use the gunship to defeat to attack the Avenger, that means it's within takedown range, right? And that you'll have the resources to do that. And then finally, for the upgrades, General's Blade is if you like to just cheat out units better, more so than like the Jedi lightsabers and like defeating them defeating other units off the bat. General's Blade is a fine addition. I just choose to do Jedi lightsaber. It just fits more my style. Perilous Position, probably one of the best, if not the best card in blue for the next for this set. I took them out because I found myself needing space at the 3 cost turn. But I may or may not put this back in the sideboard in the main deck. I just couldn't find the right space. Perilous Position is really great because it's just, free exhaust. You get to weaken a unit that's out there, making it easier to deal with. Very, very fantastic card to have. So, want to end with this. These are just cards that you may or may not want that fits your play style better. I hope you give Obi-Wan a try. I'm going to also keep playing with him for the next couple PQs, and hopefully I do better than top 16. I mean, that's already, I think, pretty good. Again, I'm not the best player out there, but I like playing these off-meta decks. I hope you do too. And without that, until next time, may the force be with you.